Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Coffee with Craig. We very much appreciate you guys tuning in and joining us as we talk about firearms policy. You name it, we're talking about it right here on Coffee with Craig. So please remember to like and share this video feed so that your friends can join in the conversation. Also, if you're listening to us on the audio podcast, once again, share it with everybody. If you go to anchor.fm, you can see we're streaming on like 9 different formats or platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify. Just check it out and let people know. So, for those of you who would prefer to listen to the show while you're driving or something like that, hey, that's a great way for you guys to get plugged in. That's anchor.fm. Also, fbcgear.com. You see the t-shirt I'm wearing right here? Gun rights, because you can't carry a cop in my pocket. Yeah, cool t-shirts just like that are all available at fbcgear.com, and know that every penny that you spend goes right back into the fight for our right to keep and bear arms. That's fbcgear.com. All right. Interesting thing occurred over the weekend. I don't know if you guys had a chance to check out. I don't know how many of you actually have to watch MSNBC or watch shows like the Meet the Press. First of all, we all know that MSNBC is just straight up anti-Second Amendment, anti-civil rights. We all know this. But recently, there was a statement that was made on one of the shows by a contributor from the New York Times, and I don't even want to attempt to. I don't even want to attempt to try and pronounce the person's name. But they had something very interesting to say when it came to their belief as to why we should not arm teachers. Now, you guys might be aware, or you might not be aware, but the New York Times recently reported that Education Secretary Betsy DeVos was going to be considering allowing federal education dollars to be utilized to purchase guns for teachers. Now, we'll get into kind of the misnomer that was presented in this particular discussion that's coming up on NBC Live, on MSNBC. But I wanted you to, before we get into that, I wanted you to hear what a panelist from the New York Times had to say. And, well, I got to tell you, this lady here, I was shocked that nobody called this lady on this particular thing. But check it out.
Republicans want to be talking about either.
And Erica, you know this really well, and I want to talk about this a bit more because when you look at some of the polling numbers, 56% of Americans are against arming school teachers. But I want to talk about what Secretary DeVos has been doing, because sometimes that does fly under the radar, right? A segment we do here on the show. She, for example, has lifted regulatory scrutiny of predatory for-profit colleges. You've reported she's begun dismissing civil rights cases in the name of efficiency. She's proposing rules that would cut student loan relief by an estimated $13 billion. And Axios claims that the Education Department is ignoring mistreatment of transgender students. Where is our federal education system going under Secretary DeVos and the Trump administration? Yamiche, Erica?
I mean, I think that the one thing that's very interesting is that Secretary DeVos was someone who was very controversial when she was coming in. Mm-hmm. She's someone who had a very opinionated view of how the federal education system should be run, and now she's carrying this out in a very quiet way. She's doing much like Jeff Sessions. They're doing what they said they were going to be doing, and there are some people that I've talked to, some advocates who are very worried about the impacts that this will have. You look at Erica's reporting. If you start arming teachers and you look at the statistics and say that there are black and brown students who are being disciplined more than their white counterparts, you could then start seeing statistics where potentially black students are getting shot or in accidents when their teachers are trying to shoot or trying to do gun safety measures. So there's this idea that the NAACP and other advocacy groups say not only are we looking at this as an issue, but it's also the idea that racially this could be a problem.
Erica.
Republicans want to be talking about either.
And Erica, you know this really well, and I want to talk about this a bit more because when you look at some of the polling numbers,
So basically what you've got here is she is saying that because teachers fear students of color, there's a greater likelihood that students of colors are going to be shot if you start arming teachers. I cannot even begin to describe how ignorant a statement that is. Here's the problem. See, first of all, it's based on this a real lack of fundamental understanding of any information or statistic. It's basically just saying we're going to take a bunch of numbers and a bunch of things that happen. We're just going to throw them together, and we're going to say this is a likely thing that could happen, and we're going to call it and then we're going to call it journalism. Because a student of color is more likely to be disciplined, they are now more likely to be shot. How exactly do you pull any of that together? I mean, keep in mind that, for example, in the state of California, and I can't speak to a lot of other states, but I can speak to the state of California where the teachers had the ability to conceal carry since 1923. And guess what? Not one student had been shot by a teacher who had been concealed carrying. Not one. But all of a sudden now, it's going to be a thing. Why is it going to be a thing? Because the NAACP said so. Really? Now, some people gave her a hard time because they were like, well, the NAACP. No, actually, this is something that the NAACP believes. The NAACP in Oregon made it a point to point out that, they believe, here's the statement, the NAACP finds the very idea of arming teachers as a solution to gun violence utterly absurd and misguided. We know that children of color are portrayed and seen as more dangerous, more culpable, and less human than children viewed as white. Given this background, how can parents of black children feel comfortable sending their children to school where guns abound and where the perception of threat could have deadly consequences? But that's the Florida NAACP. There was actually a piece that was done, and this was actually in Time magazine. And then once again, this is the national. This is Sherilyn Eiffel, who is the president and director of the Council for NAACP Legal Foundation. This is the Legal Foundation Fund, right? She's basically saying the exact same thing. That, well, because black children are seen as more dangerous, they're probably going to get shot by teachers. Now, there is one thing to note, and there is one thing that I think it is important that we do know. Yes, young African-American men are more likely. When I say more likely, I mean statistics have shown that they are in particular, as their percentage in society, have the greatest likelihood of being victims of gun violence. But once again, what they always continue to fail to tell you is that the perpetrator, the individual who is shooting them, is more than likely another young black male. Which means maybe, just maybe, it's not a teacher problem. Just saying. We also know it's not as much of a law enforcement problem as they want to make it out to believe. Because you are much more likely, and a young black man is much more likely to be shot by another young black man than he is by a law enforcement officer. But we don't want to talk about that. That's not something that the NAACP wants to talk about. That's not an article that Time magazine is going to put out there. That's not something that MSNBC is going to put on the air. Because, well, we have to find a way to blame the system. We have to find a way to blame the man. Let's blame the teachers. Let's blame law enforcement. But let's not take a look at those who are most likely to commit an act of violence with a firearm against our children. Let's not actually look that in the mirror. And let's blame the gun. Let's blame gun laws, even though chances are that those individuals who obtain those firearms obtain them illegally. Let's look at law-abiding citizens who own firearms. Let's punish them. Because once again, we can't look at where the real problem is. The fact that you have individuals who somehow believe that it is okay to commit acts of violence, to use deadly force. I'm just saying. Now, mind you, people are saying, well, why is Secretary DeVos considering this? I mean, why does this even make sense? And the thing is that understand it wasn't like Secretary DeVos just out of the blue just said, hey, why don't we see if we could take some of that money and give it to teachers so they can go get guns. That's not what happened. What happened was, specifically, state of Oklahoma and the state of Texas asked questions. They had programs. They wanted to know if that was applicable. If those funds would be applicable. Could they utilize those funds in order to be able to purchase firearms for teachers? She was asked. So when you say she was considering, how about starting off with was asked to consider? Isn't that more accurate? Isn't that actually what happened? But no, you guys are like, she just willy-nilly was like, I wonder if we could take some of this money and go buy some guns for teachers. Like it just popped into her head that made a lot of sense. That was just the first thing that came to her mind. But what it all comes down to is that y'all, they have an agenda. We know they have an agenda. And I don't want to get into, left versus right education agenda and how much they hate Betsy DeVos. I don't want to get into that. But it just goes to show, once again, the willingness that gun grabbers are willing, the lengths to which they are willing to go to in order to expand their hatred of firearms to any area that they can so that they can seek to squelch rights. See, they believe that they have the moral high ground on firearms. So as long as they can tie it to anything in any way, then they believe that they can then affect change in that area. In this case, it's education, and they want to make a statement about education, and so they plan on doing that by going after the right to keep and bear arms. Because, well, hey, they are the morally righteous. Anyway, folks, that's going to be it for today's Coffee with Craig. I very much appreciate you guys tuning in. Please remember to like and share these videos. Tell everyone about the Firearms Policy Coalition. We are the home in the fight for civil rights. Got to use them or you're going to lose them. You guys take care.
If you like our videos, follow, subscribe, like, and share.